Hello, welcome back. So today we'll be discussing chapter 1 from our Discovering Computers textbook. This chapter talks about today's technologies, and this is a very basic chapter in nature, so where we will learn about what are some of the technologies we have used in the past, and we'll make a transition to some of the emerging technologies. Some of the content will be very familiar to you. For example, what are some of the input devices, output devices, and so on and so forth. Some content might be new, so please pay attention, and it is perfectly fine. You can actually post your comments after you watch this video. So let's go and get started. So this chapter, I'm going to turn on the projector so you will be able to capture some of the slides as well. If you're watching this video from home, you can actually have the slideshow up and running. We are currently using a Discovering Computers 2017 textbook for this chapter. The slides are available on our site as well. So when you run this video in the background, you can also have maybe in a split screen open your slideshow so you can actually observe some of the slides, because some of these slides will be very much visible and some of the content might not be visible, especially when I move around. The device I have, it actually follows my physical movement, so sometimes you might not be able to see what I'm referring on the slide here. So as you can see, the name of the chapter is Introducing Today's Technologies. The term here, today's technology, might not make some relevance because some of the emerging technologies are slightly different as shared in the chapter, because this chapter probably was written a year and a half ago, and by that time some of the emerging technologies already have emerged and changed. So some of the objectives, I'll skip these, I'll jump directly to some of the bullets in the first slide. So these are the objectives. All right, that's the first slide I'm going to work on. So it says today's technologies, that's the heading over there, and it talks about because technology changes, you must keep up with the changes to remain digitally literal. In fact, many years ago, we used to spend a lot of time discussing digital divide. Who can tell me what digital divide is? In fact, in the media, still they talk a lot about digital divide. In fact, there are a lot of studies done on digital divide. What do you think what digital divide means? Yeah.
How it's creating like a distance between this and you communicating with someone over internet, like email or text messaging.
Okay. So anybody else has any other comments? Yeah.
Isn't it the difference in generations of your technology?
Right. Yeah, you're right. So some people in the society, they don't have the privilege to have access to these technologies. For example, high-speed internet. Or because of the lack of resources, or because of their financial status in the society. So if you don't have the access to these technologies, smartphone, computers, Wi-Fi, high-speed internet, then you probably will not have certain kind of privileges or certain kind of opportunities or resources. So that's what a digital divide is. So imagine you don't even have the internet and computer, how you're going to create your LinkedIn account, how you're going to learn about newer opportunities and resources. What if all the material in your classroom is available on the internet? In many high schools these days, that's what they're doing. So what they started doing in high schools, especially in state of California, many high schools, they provide Chromebooks for the people who actually might not have, or they provide Chromebooks to all the students, but might not have computers or access to these technologies. So at least they have access to some of these resources. So digital literacy involves having a current knowledge and understanding of computers, mobile devices, web, and the related technologies. In fact, what if I tell you that you can travel for free anywhere in the world? And you'll be amazed at how that's possible, because I need to spend a lot of time on airline ticket, hotel, lodging, and all those things, and maybe meals. What if I tell you, if you are a literal in digital technologies and some of the emerging technology, it is possible you can travel for free. And I have done probably hundreds of times. I have traveled free all over the world, absolutely free, because of the knowledge you have available, which is on the internet. So a lot of people actually can benefit from that knowledge. So there are a lot of free points. You can actually get a free ticket anywhere, and I'm talking not only domestic but internationally. And you can also have the free hotels. Just in last 12 months, I probably have traveled 6 times around the world, and most of the time free. I'm already booked for December, already booked for next June, and most of the travel is probably free. So that is possible if you have those resources available to you. You understand how these technologies work. You can actually have a lot of benefits of that technology. Even 20 years ago, when I was actually in the industry, half of the year I actually used to work from home. Rest of the time I used to travel for the company. So even right now I teach most of the classes online, or at least half of the classes online. So when I'm teaching online, I don't even have to leave my home. So if you actually develop the skills of today's technologies, you can be anywhere, and you can actually benefit from these technologies. Now, a computer is a device which looks like this. So if I can capture here on this whiteboard, computer is a device. Typically, we have a CPU, central processing unit, which is considered as the brain of the computer, and it is connected to some peripheral devices like input devices, output devices, and we are very familiar. By the way, the screen you're looking at, where is the CPU in this screen? Where is the CPU? Where is the brain of this computer?
On the motherboard, is it?
So sometimes there are some desktop these days, they're all-in-one desktops, which means that it is possible this particular screen might have a built-in motherboard. Sometimes it might be a small box underneath. So they have combined many of these input and processing units. And your input device might be a keyboard, might be a mouse, or might be a scanner, or might be some kind of other way, maybe a voice recognized device. So you can talk to your computer. Many of these devices, you can use your voice to communicate. So those are your input devices. What do we provide with the input device? We provide typically data from input device. That's how the data is provided. Because CPU, or the brain of the computer, needs to take some data to process it. That's where the processing takes place. So the brain of the computer is going to process it, and process to do what? Process to produce what?
Information.
Yeah, useful information, typically useful information, not useless information. If the computer is providing useless information, basically it's no use to us. So we use these technologies like smartphones, tablets, desktops, laptops, and even kiosk machines and other types of terminals. When you go to the airport, for example, when you land at LAX, let's say you fly from Canada or Mexico, there's a kiosk machine. It might ask you, we're going to take your picture, we're going to scan your passport, and we'll print a receipt for you. And you do your own processing when you land at LAX. So that's the advantage of using these digital technologies. Saves us a lot of time. Used to take a lot of time to go through the immigration. Now it actually is much more efficient. Same thing when you are departing from the airport. In fact, many times I print my boarding cards and even the baggage tags from home. How many of you have done it? You print your boarding cards, even your baggage tags. And you don't even have to go anywhere. Once you go to the airport, you don't have to talk to anyone. Just drop your suitcase where you need to drop it, and you're ready to go. And even your boarding card, you don't even have to print it. You actually have somewhere on your smartphone, and they can scan directly your boarding card from your smartphone. So that's the advantage of using these digital technologies. So this is where the processing takes place. When I say processing, who can tell me what process means? So here, this is where the processing is happening, that's where the CPU is. What does it mean by processing? So you're cleansing the data, massaging the data, scrubbing the data, verifying the data, authenticating the data, and we can throw 20 different other terms. You're doing something with the data. What do you do with the data? Yeah,
you interpret it so that it can be processed into human readable information.
Right. So if I have your ID number, or if I have your departure time, or if I have your student ID, whatever the data you provide me, I do something with the data based on what? Based on some kind of IS, information system. That's where the information system comes in. Information system is a set of programs, not one program, set of programs. So they're connected to the database system in the background. They might be verifying your information, the data provided by you. Let's say your ticket number, or your six-digit or six-character number to verify who you are, and then it is verifying against the database. So there are smart information systems. They pick up that and verify that one. It could be taking an image, verifying an image, and so on and so forth. Now, these information systems, they reside on information technologies. So information technologies are hardware, gateways, routers, physical infrastructure, wireless infrastructure, all that is the internet. IT. That IT has information system sits on the top. So IT and IS, they are not the same. Just like science and technology, what is the difference between science and technology? We bundle these two terms together. When I say science, what comes to your mind?
He said science?
Science.
Research?
So science is research.
Using mathematical and qualitative data to define phenomena in the world around us.
Some kind of algorithm. So science are theories, concepts, research, some phenomena discovered. All those things are sciences. Now, technology, that's where the science sits. Once you want to create a real, let's say, vaccine, that's where the technology is. You want to create some kind of device, that's where the technology is. So technology is the platform where the science runs. Same thing with information technology. Information technology is a physical, tangible infrastructure. That's where IS actually lives. Okay, they are not the same. There is a slight difference. By the way, none of the two words, they're exactly the same. There's always a difference. There's always some difference in definition. So that's where your processing happens, and once the data has been processed, then we would like to see the results. We would like to see that information. So where do you see the information? Maybe on a screen, maybe on a console, maybe on a printer, maybe on a different format. Sometimes you want that information or data to be stored. So you need some kind of storage mechanism. Where do you store the data typically in a computer? On a hard drive. If you have like a USB or some kind of other media, you can store it in other media. A lot of people also these days store in the cloud, which is some external storage somewhere else, not locally stored. It's stored somewhere else, so you can access it from around the world. Sometimes the data or information you want to communicate. So you receive the data, you want to send it to other platforms. You want to put it in social media. You want to put it some other site. You want to send it to your Canvas site, for example. So you can also communicate that information. Now, textbooks do not show this piece here, the communication piece here. So normally they only show the storage, and that's what you're going to see in the book. But I believe that storage is also important part. The communication is also the important part of your entire computer system. So you accept the data, you process the data, and produce. And I like to add a word: useful information. Useful information. Information has to be useful, otherwise it is not beneficial to you, to your company, or to the society. So what devices do we use? We use laptops, tablets, desktops, all-in-one desktops, and servers. So these computers are these computers servers? So these are not servers, so they are connected to servers. So these computers are called clients. So these are clients. So all this environment is called client-server environment. So servers are somewhere in secure location, and these clients talk to the server whenever they want to access the outside world. For example, www, World Wide Web. They want to send a request to print, it goes through the server. When they want to talk from this machine to this machine, it goes through the server. So server is a main central location which we use to communicate. Also these days, we have other types of devices. We have smartphones. Anybody who does not have a smartphone in this room, which is shocking. 15 years ago, nobody had a smartphone. 25 years ago, nobody had a phone. Nobody carried a phone. So for you, 20 years is a long time. For human race, for society, it's a very, very short time. So it's a very short time. In 20 years, we have evolved more probably than 1,000 years before. The access to the knowledge and information you have, in fact, 7 years ago, I used to show a slideshow that by 2020 and 2040, there'll be one computer which will be as smart as the entire human race ever existed. And by 2020, you will have access to the more knowledge than ever humanity had the access to that knowledge. Remember, previously in the previous eras, scholars used to travel thousands of miles, used to take them months or years to get to those two textbooks or 2 books or 5 books or with that library or this library. Now every single thing is accessible to you from your smartphone. So which is incredible. Does it mean that we are more knowledgeable now or less knowledgeable now? So are we really taking advantage of the things which are beneficial to us, or we are also have a tendency to waste time?
We have a tendency to waste time.
So we have tendency to waste time. For example, every book you can imagine is available online. Some of them are free, some you have to pay for it, pay for them. In fact, about 17, 18 years ago, Google started Google Scholar. Google Scholar used to call it something else. Google Scholar.google.com. If you go there, you can access almost any article, any textbook, any book in the world. Some of them are free, some of them they have some royalties and you have to pay a little bit. So, having that access to the information, that doesn't mean that we are designed as humans to get to the correct information. We might not have the tendency to find the right information. We might just get distracted and go to other tangents. It is quite possible that you go to YouTube, you want to watch a TED Talk, on the right panel, suddenly you see something else, you're distracted and you might end up going somewhere else. Your intention was to only spend 15 minutes. Now after 2 hours, you feel useless. You feel now after I have not done anything, I need a break. Then you spend another 30 minutes taking a break. So that's what the human nature is. So how do you keep yourself focused? So you keep yourself focused by ensuring whatever information you're seeking, you quickly access that information, take advantage, and move on. Chandler, you had a comment?
Yes, I almost feel like because access to information is so easy and available these days that we place less superficial value on that information.
That's right. So I started my lecture initially with this. When you have something available to you for free, you don't give that same value. So if there's free food, there's a higher chances of wasting that food. Now for the same food, if you have to pay $50 a plate, you'll make sure everything is cleaned up. So that's what the human nature is. When you have so much data available. And by the way, when we say information, if I want to make the hierarchy of this one, and again, this is not in your book, so data can produce information, information can produce knowledge, and in fact, most of the organizations, they have their own knowledge management. They call it CAMs, knowledge management portals. So that's where if they are discussing something with a client, some kind of project, they will go to their knowledge management portals and try to figure it out. What did we do previously when we were dealing with that similar client? From the knowledge, what do you get? You get wisdom. From wisdom, what do you get? You get your decisions. From decisions, what do you get? You basically are more productive and more resourceful, and so on and so forth. So if we can continue this particular hierarchy, but that's where the decision makers are trying to do. They are trying to get best possible data so they can get more useful information. Now, information to you might be information, but for somebody else it might be data. So remember that. If something is information to you, might be data to somebody else or another system. And that information can produce knowledge. Why do I need knowledge? So I can be a better decision maker. So I can make better decisions based on which cars are going to sell in 2020. How many electric cars, how many Teslas we need for the marketplace. What should be the price? Those are the type of decisions the decision makers are trying to make based on the knowledge, information, and data. And of course, now the societies are very complex, so they need multiple pieces of data coming in. Multiple people processing that data and producing information. So that's why they have the CEOs, they have these vice presidents, they have these other people working for them, directors and managers and supervisors. So the whole idea is the final final knowledge comes to the decision maker. He or she can make better decision. So we have some of the devices we are very familiar. We can go from here, game consoles. We have wearable devices. How many of you have wearable devices? Like what kind of wearable device?
Do you want to go?
Yeah, so you wear it.
Apple Watch.
Apple Watch is an example. Fitbit is an example. I remember last week I told you I was traveling. So for 10 days we had a Fitbit. So we walked 65 miles, which is about 6.5 miles. So it's actually very useful. It is connected to an app on your smartphone, and it tells you a lot about you. So it tells you your history and so on and so forth. Some of you probably, especially ladies, love to observe these things for weight control, for calorie control, for other things. Some guys are also for their exercise routine. They want to see what kind of food they're eating. So these wearable devices are very useful. The idea is that in the future, that's what you need. You will not probably will be carrying smartphones. So some of these smart devices, your Fitbits and these Apple, you also get phone calls. You can also receive text messages. So gradually, you'll see some kind of other device other than smartphone, I would say in the next 7 to 10 years. You will not be carrying a traditional cell phone. Standing here about 12, 13 years ago, I used to make a claim, 14, 15 years ago, one day you will carry a device which will have 8 devices built in. And you will have your camera, you will have your video, you will have the internet, you will be able to text, you will be able to watch videos, you will be able to listen to the music. Guess what? Now that device is ubiquitous. That device is, everybody carries one. It's a smartphone. Similarly, the smartphone is changing very rapidly. So you will not be carrying the same smartphone 8 to 10 years from now. By the time you are my age, will not be looking at these traditional technologies we are looking at. That's what this chapter is discussing, what is actually in the pipeline as well. So start thinking about those things. When you have time, start pondering and start reading more about it. So if you specialize in one of those areas, that might be your niche area, and that you might become the most important source or resource for your organization. So ebook reader, some of you probably have ebooks. Anybody has an ebook? Ebook, which one?
I have your Microsoft Access 2016 and your Microsoft Excel 2016 on ebook.
On ebook, okay. So we have digital camera. In fact, a lot of digital cameras, the markets are struggling because the smartphones we have, they have very powerful cameras. And last week, by the way, what is the resolution of your digital camera on your smartphone?
720.
So 7 megapixel.
Oh.
So what is the megapixel you have?
108 megapixels.
You have 108 megapixel?
I don't have 108.
Yeah.
That's what some phones these days have.
Yeah.
Anywhere from 8 to 12 megapixels.
Yeah, 8 to 12 is typical megapixel in your smartphone. Last week, China introduced camera, 500 megapixel. 500 megapixel can recognize each face, each body out of thousands of people in the crowd. So if they take an image of the entire stadium, like say 50,000 people sitting in a stadium, they can actually identify every single one of them. That's a 500 megapixel. And in Chinese market, when you go there, they know who you are. Any place you go, they can recognize it with that kind of high resolution. And also in England, they have closed circuit cameras, CCTVs everywhere. So they know exactly where you are. We do not know what the state does or what kind of things they do with their. Also, when you drive on the freeway, there are cameras everywhere. They can read your number plates, and they can find whom they're looking for. Again, not necessarily they are using for bad purposes, but there's a kidnapping, and we see sometimes they're looking for a child, for example, and they can read those number plates and find those cars as well. So those are digital cameras, and of course we can spend a lot of time discussing smartphone, which will do that throughout the semester as well. I already have shown you something of that sort, so I'm going to move on. And for some reason, my clicker is not behaving. There you go. A keyboard contains key you press. We are very familiar with keyboards. There might be digital keyboards. We are getting away. In fact, while you're driving, do you really have to type something? No, these days you can talk to your smartphone or your app. You say, find this, or give me the address of this location, or take me to this closest Costco, or things like that. And your navigation app will probably recognize it, and it will find that location for you. So we also have pointing devices these days. In fact, the monitors you have, they also have touch screens. You can also use some of the other pointing devices. These pointing devices, not only they can point, but they can also allow you to select. So there are a variety of different types of pointing devices in the marketplace. Scanner, some of you are very familiar. In fact, when you go to Target or Walmart, you scan your own items. That's a kind of scanner. So it's recognizing some of the barcodes. A few years ago, we also introduced QR codes. Have you heard QR codes? The QR codes are becoming like a standard. So because there were so many different types of barcodes. When you receive your mail today, go and check on the top of your mail. There will be a barcode on your envelope. So that is a barcode created by USPS, United States Postal Service, and that barcode machine reader recognizes what is the zip code, and it sends in a certain bundle, or it sends in a certain when they're sorting that envelope to a certain location. So it saves a lot of time. So physically, people do not have to waste time to separate those things. An output device is like a scanner and a console. Output devices allow us to look at the results. I'm not going to spend too much time on that one. These are some of the examples. There might be an output device which looks like this. We have this one in M109. If you go to M109, we have 3D printers. 3D printers have not taken off yet. There was a lot of celebration a few years ago that 3D printer will be everywhere, but still they're kind of expensive. Gradually, this is what happens. Prices will go down. Again, remember the consoles you're looking at, the monitors you're looking at, about 20 years ago, these consoles, each one was probably $10,000. So I remember 32-inch screen TV with not high definition, but it was kind of high definition, but not the quality we have, was about $10,000. Now you can go to Costco right now, get 50-inch ultra high definition 4K for $299, which is an unbelievable price. So similarly, these technologies, like these emerging technologies, will gradually become cheaper. You will be able to print your food. There'll be some apps. You will have apps on your smartphone, and you can talk to these. This is how it's going to help out. While you're in your car, say, make me this item. And by the time you get home, the printer is going to print that food for you. And that's what they are using in the space also, because in space they have limitation of the space. So they have these cartridges of different ingredients and a 3D printer. So these programs can print food for you. And similarly in medical field, they might be able to print some of those skin or some bones and some of the other parts of the body. So again, this looks like science fiction. Everything we have done in last 40, 50 years, it is actually has materialized. Remember Back to the Future movie? That he has this board and he can hoverboard, he can fly. Do we have the hoverboard now?
Something we have.
A guy just flew in Channel, which is between France and England, on hoverboard. Did you follow that news? Just a few months ago. So he flew on the day of independence of France in front of the president and thousands of people. Then he tried to flew from on the Channel. He was not successful once or twice, but he flew successfully, which is about 80 miles distance on a thing like it looks like a hoverboard. Anything you see in the past, like teleporting is already happening. Not exactly the way you think, not exactly your physical body is not disappearing, but I will be standing here. It's already happening in the high-end universities, and my physical 3D body is here, and image of my 3D body is somewhere else lecturing. It's already happening. So that's kind of teleporting. So you might be here and might be 10 other places at the same time. So also other kind of things, Jetsons, remember 1960s and all these Jetsons. Every technology they have shown in Jetsons, in 60s and 70s movies, it's all real. So it's amazing the way humans think, and then it materializes. So when you are watching today's technology, you see this guy, this has a robot body. It's already available for the people who are handicapped. They cannot move any limbs with the robot bodies. Have you seen those robot bodies? Yeah. So they can actually walk around. They can do everything just by thinking. Just by thinking. They have robotic arms, robotic legs, just because they think those things are happening. So don't underestimate the things which you are going to see 30 years from now. So 30 years technologies, they almost always materialize. Everything slightly different in a different format, but it actually has materialized in most of the cases. Dimitri, comment.
So I understand the little thing about teleportation and things of those aspects, and I kind of understand, that science and technology are working hand in hand to evolve at an exponentially increasing rate, which I do personally believe can be an issue to some extent, but we should have better control over what we produce and what we manufacture. And I do think that these little 3D printers are going to be the beginning of a new era where large corporations aren't controlling our aspect of social media, our aspect of personal ability to use a cell phone, such as that.
You're absolutely right. This is a very big concern, not only for you, for all the people who feel there should be fairness. In fact, when the Genome Project was taking place, if you're not familiar, Genome Project, they wanted to do the sequencing for every single letter for DNA. They want to find out all the letters in a certain sequence. So there were companies, there were corporations, they wanted to completely patent it, which means nobody can develop anything without giving them royalty or without their permission. And similar things also happened in other technologies as well, such as fertilizers, for example, and seeds. There are a handful of the companies that control all the seeds. So if a poor country which does not have resources, they want to have certain kind of rice or certain crops, they have to go to these major companies who are multi-billion-dollar company. They have to pay them in order to buy those rights for the limited season to grow those crops. So this is exactly what's happening in technology. Right now, Facebook controls 2.5 billion people, and Facebook doesn't sell or doesn't make anything, doesn't sell any service in real terms, but they make 18 to 19 billion dollars a quarter. They're making close to $100 billion or so. Same thing with Facebook. They are not really making any products or services per se, but they actually control a lot of things. So it's all about who controls what. So this is a very big concern. So these technologies probably end up with in a similar fashion in certain hands. So this is something we want to think as when we are becoming digital literal in the emerging technologies. Some of the other devices we are familiar, some of the display units, we are very familiar with these. We also use earbuds, headphones, some of the other ways we can communicate. So not only you are accessing the data, you are also communicating with these devices. So then we have memories, we have storage media and storage devices. The difference between storage device and storage media is your USB could be storage media, so you need some kind of device to access it. For example, we still use small cassettes. So cassettes, like remember we used to have these audio cassettes. Similar kind of device we still use for long-term storage because their storage is more durable, lasts for hundreds of years. So large corporations, they still have data stored on those media, but some of the other other advantages, not only you can read or write, you can actually access these devices very, very quickly. An example is cloud. You want to access your data very quickly. You don't want to wait for send a request and then wait for the data to be accessed. So the difference between memory is typically volatile. It's called temporary memory, short-term memory. It's also called volatile memory. Memory is something you access instantaneously. When the word memory comes, typically the word comes to our mind is called RAM, random access memory. The difference between RAM or storage is permanent. It's called non-volatile. You do not need the source of energy all the time. So CD is an example, hard drive is an example, USB is an example. Even a solid state is an example. Solid state is another type of storage we'll see probably in the next slide, that it is permanent in nature. But it's a little slower than the memory. Memory is much, much faster. So if you want to visualize it, the memory will be right next to the CPU. It's not inside the CPU, it's right next to the CPU. This is your RAM, very close. So it's faster. The storage, your hard drive, is slightly away from the storage, away from the CPU. Now some of these are these computers these days we use, the CPUs we use. We also have you heard cache memory? Cache memory is inside CACH, cache memory. That's your cache memory. And this might be called L1 cache. So cache memory is inside the CPU. It's faster than RAM, faster than the RAM. But it's smaller in size. So a small piece of data you want to store for a short time, it might go to this cache memory, so it makes it more efficient. But if you're opening up a browser, that needs to be opened up somewhere, so that will be opened up in RAM. But if you have a lot of data to be processed, that probably will be stored in the storage device. So that's how you want to think about it, the differences between different types of media. So here's something we use all the time. Some of you probably have these memory cards from your cameras. You probably are familiar with DVDs or CDs. Used to be very well-known way to store data. These days, we don't use the CDs and DVDs to store the data or access the data. They are actually probably in the last stages because many of the USBs technologies have killed some of the existing technology. We used to have other types of storage media as well. A lot of you actually store, most of you store on the cloud. your social media, your emails, your Google accounts, and what else? What else do you use? Apple accounts, if you have Amazon accounts. Even you have on Canvas, you can upload your own data. So all these the types of cloud available to you, which saves you times. You don't have to worry about it. What if I forget that one? But again, you have to be a little careful when you store something in the cloud. Do you feel comfortable storing your social security number on the cloud? Do you feel comfortable uploading your very personal documents, birth certificates, passports, and those things? So you have to be careful. You have to make that determination that what if the company you are uploading on their server, what if that company is bought by another company? And that happens all the time. All the policies and promises they have made might not be applicable anymore. Be very careful when you upload very sensitive data. Yeah.
What about security in cloud?
So you can actually have the security in cloud. Is there a chance somebody can hack it? Probably not. So what I do, I have a lot of things in the cloud, but something very, very sensitive, I don't feel comfortable yet. But probably this is the direction we are taking as humans, and everything will be in the cloud. We'll not be carrying anything. We'll not be carrying any kind of storage media. So USBs, solid state. Solid states are faster, way faster than RAM, but they are still a little bit more expensive. In fact, if you have some extra money, you want to buy an external hard drive, if you buy the solid state hard drive, it's way more faster. But it's a little bit more expensive. Hard drives these days, you can buy 2 terabyte, 3 terabyte, very large storage and hard drive for very low price, $50, $60, and you can have that storage. All right, now we are shifting gears. So now we are going in a different direction. So I put some of the terms here just to make it really, really simple so you can understand. So when the word internet comes to your mind, or when you hear the word internet, what do you think, how would you define the internet to somebody who's not familiar? Somebody else, somebody from this side. Help me out, guys. What is the internet?
Networks.
So it's a collection of networks. What does it mean? Yeah.
Simple answer. Like, I would tell someone like a beam of information from your phone to space and then to wherever your information is coming.
Okay, so are you accessing the internet from the space? So if this is...
I think space is just the way that we would use like the car, I guess you could say like it's the actual
Okay.
where it meets.
Okay, here's continental USA, and we have Canada and Mexico here. Here's Hawaii. We have no direct land between Hawaii and USA. You agree with that one, right? How do you have the internet connectivity between those two lands?
Satellite.
So you're using satellite, Chandler is using satellite. Anybody else? Are we using satellite to connect Australia and USA and Europe and USA and Hawaii and USA and Guam Island and all those other places?
Yeah.
Answer is no. It's very expensive. Satellites are very expensive. So ultimately it will happen in that way. That's where a lot of companies are sending hundreds of small satellites. These satellites are like a loaf of bread size, really, really small. In fact, state of California is sending their own satellite just very recently. They have agreed that one. Most of the satellites are not humongous like bus size. There are some satellites that are equal to your big school bus size. Most of the satellites are like this big. And they're very sensitive and they have very high-end technologies built in. But we are not using the satellites. What we have we have fiber optic physical wires in the ocean, everywhere in the ocean. That's how all the continents are connected. That's how we are connecting to all other lands. So these ship lines, they know, or at least sometimes you hear in the news, the ship damaged that country's fiber optic infrastructure. For a week, for a month, for 2 months, sometimes they don't have the internet, or they have to use the alternate way to find the internet connectivity. So right now we are using the fiber optic. Fiber optic uses glass strands, very thin glass strand, like in a small fiber optic, there'll be hundreds of them, these glass strands, and it uses laser or light technology, which runs on a speed of light. It's really, really fast. So if you communicate somebody with somebody in Australia, it will be instantaneous. It's really fast. So we are still using those kind of technologies. Just to give you an idea, and probably that's what you see here. When you have the land, then you can use the towers to send these cellular signals to communicate. What if you don't have the ability? Let's say you are somewhere in the middle of Amazon, you don't have those fiber optics, you don't have those cell phone towers. Then in that case, those scientists, they carry satellite technologies. They will be able to communicate with satellites, either on their satellite phones, they have to carry a small box with them, and they will be able to access the internet as well. Also in some areas in our country, we don't have high-speed internet. So those people can access the internet through satellite. It's slightly more expensive, but you can have Dish Network or DirecTV or some of the other satellite providers. They can provide you the internet as well. So that's another way. Slightly more expensive, but consumers, they are trying to save money on the. By the way, what is a typical internet connection? Your ISP, internet service provider, how much they charge you for your internet? Some numbers, Erica, how much do you pay for your internet? $80?
Well, it's most of the time it's around that price, like 80, but that's
Bundled up.
that's all of them.
So it's probably your phone, probably your TV, probably your internet,
Text message.
and other services, right? Is it all bundled up? Probably, right? And $35. Okay. How about you guys here? How much do you pay for the internet? Don't tell me I stay with my parents. I don't know.
That's all bundled, so you'd have to break it down.
Okay, so I actually have researched that you can be smart, savvy consumer as well, because most of the time you are not really, unless you are a heavy gamer or you are into streaming a lot of videos and those kind of things, then you need a very high-end internet. Even if you have the basic internet, you can be pretty comfortable. Basic internet is not that bad these days. So they might be enticing you that our internet is very, very high-end, very fast, but you probably do not need that kind of internet for your personal access. If you're a business, then probably you need the high-end internet because you have a server, you have all that traffic, and so on and so forth. So be conscious about that one when you're making the decision. You can probably easily survive a $20, $25 internet as well. So $25 internet is pretty fast. It's not that bad. Yeah.
Most people have like an unlimited plan where they can have like unlimited text, calls, and internet.
So then we are moving in a different place, which is your cell phone bundle. That's a different bundle. So your cell phone bundle might be a collection of three things: your data service, your text service, and voice. So how many of you have T-Mobile, for example? There are 4 big providers in our country, then a bunch of small providers. We have AT&T is the biggest one. Verizon is very large. These are the 2 big ones. Then we have T-Mobile. And then we have Sprint. These are the 4 big ones, right? So we used to have 6 big ones. Then they got together and they purchased each other. Right now, T-Mobile is trying to purchase Sprint. I think it's already approved by the FTC. So then we'll have 3 big ones. Now, if you have T-Mobile, you travel to 200 countries, you have free texting and data anywhere. So I was driving in Dubai a couple of months ago, but for driving you need navigation. And guess what I was using? I was driving between Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and I had no problems whatsoever. You can use your WhatsApp, you can actually search things, you can find things, addresses, and all those things. You can text people by using without paying any additional charges. Now, if you do not have those, let's say T-Mobile, you have some other plan, you might end up owing them thousands of dollars when you come back. Literally, people, you probably have heard horror stories. They come back, they owe $2,000, and it's a shock to them. So be very careful when you travel. Many of the major providers, they also provide free service in Mexico and Canada. Not all of them, some of them. So the smaller companies, they sit on their infrastructure. Like, have you heard Metro PCS? So T-Mobile actually purchased it just recently. Now they call it T-Mobile Metro. So they were using T-Mobile infrastructure. Similarly, some of the other providers, they use Sprint infrastructure or AT&T or Verizon. So internet is a collection of, just want to clarify something before I get distracted again. Internet is physical infrastructure or wireless infrastructure. Internet is the example of IT, information technology. It provides you the framework. It provides you the infrastructure, either wireless or wired. Internet is not World Wide Web. Internet is not your emailing system. Internet is not your file transfer protocol system. Internet is just a physical or wireless infrastructure. We use that infrastructure to exchange ideas. How do we exchange ideas? Typically by putting a component on the internet, which is called www. We call it web, World Wide Web. So it's a collection of data information. So many years ago, these organizations and countries, they agreed that we should be able to consistently able to read the data. And you need some kind of program to read the data from the World Wide Web. What do we call that program? The browser. Which browser do we use? Chrome.
I'm an Edge guy.
Edge. Firefox. Safari. There are some programs to read the data from the World Wide Web. You also have some of the systems called emailing system. They also sit on the infrastructure which is called the internet. So on the internet you have different pieces. So World Wide Web is just one of those pieces which sits on the internet. I think the next slide might explain. So the World Wide Web, short for the web, is a global library of information. Then you can also search that library or search that data or information. What do you use for that one? To search something.
Search engines.
So search engines, what do we call those search engines? Give me an example of one or two.
Google.
So
Bing.
Bing, used to be Yahoo used to have their own. I think they use Bing in the background now. And Google is famous for that one. We used to have a few other ones. Other ones have kind of disappeared or they're in the background. Many years ago when internet was available the first time, anybody would like to predict when or have the knowledge that when the internet was available to the public?
1997.
91. I accessed the internet the first time in Cal State Long Beach. I was a student in 94. So 94 is the first time, and it was mind-boggling. It was absolutely mind-boggling. In fact, there was a girl in our class, and she called me and she said, "Give me your address." I gave her my address. She plugged in my address, and she showed me the directions from Cal State Long Beach to Redondo Beach, where I used to live. And I was like, my jaw dropped. I could not believe that it's possible. So this is only 94. Imagine 25 years ago. 25 years ago, our world has completely changed upside down. Completely. Now, things we have created in the last 25 years are unbelievable. They are like magical, science fiction. And imagine add 25 more years. Things we are going to create 25 years from now. Your children will not be talking to a physical person like me, probably. They will be talking to holograms. And we have those technologies already, but they're expensive. But again, in 25 years, you will be talking to and shaking hand and all those things with those kind of beings. And this is what's going to happen. It looks like strange ideas, but the last 25 years, if I start counting, the things we have done as humans are incredible. So I'm going to show you a video if I get a chance after we are done with this one. So web consists of World Wide Web collection of web pages. The collection of web pages is called the web or World Wide Web. A website is a collection of documents, information. So you create could be one page on a website, or could be thousands of pages on a website, depending on the complexity. Some websites are static; they are not interactive. Most of the Web 2.0 or Web 2.3.0, they're very interactive. You can do things, you can get results, you can actually be very interactive with these sites. And these are some of the examples. We already talked about a browser is a software, so you can browse through. So browse just like you're browsing in a mall, in a store. That's what you're doing. You're browsing inside a web page. A search engine allows you to search things. We already talked about it. Some of the search engine examples. You can search. You can be search specific things, like you're searching for, let's say, articles, or you're searching for some of the other books. There are specific search programs available. Some of them they require login. Some of them they require some kind of financial information. They are not free. Then it comes to social media, social networking sites. Social media has really revolutionized how we work as humans. Again, there are pros and cons. MySpace was one of the most famous many years ago. MySpace was the dominating social media network, and in fact, everybody was on MySpace. So MySpace started disappearing when Facebook and some of the other social media started becoming popular. So, but just remember that these kind of technologies, they are kind of they're not there for forever. They will kind of disappear once the newer technology comes and plays its role. Also, we talked about some of the concerns we have. If you put your data on the web, it is possible it might be hacked. There are viruses. There are people who actually can create malicious software, worms and viruses and Trojan horses. There is more discussion on that one later on in our class. We'll talk more about it. So privacy is another issue. So when you are on your phone, what if somebody's spying your location, somebody's spying about kind of information you're accessing because they are selling that information to the advertisers to make money. This is another concern we have. Some of the health concerns. What health concerns we can have with social media?
Addiction.
So, sorry?
Addiction and
Yeah, so internet addiction is real. In fact, in many countries, it is treated as internet as any other addiction. They take you in boot camp for 3 to 4 weeks. In Taiwan, in Korea, in many other parts of the world, the kids as young as 9 years old, they are in those boot camps because they cannot live without the internet. They are addicted to the internet. So when you grow up, you're already grown up, but when you have your children, be very careful when you give these technologies in their hands. Because there's a tendency they might not be able to differentiate between pros and cons. They might get into something which is easily accessible, useless videos, for example, or cyberbullying. So thousands of people, young people, have committed suicide because of cyberbullying, some of the other related issues. Some of the people you probably know that in your high school or middle school went through the same process. So the studies show every fourth person, one out of four, they think or consider suicide who are under 18 years old. So when I was growing up, there was no such thing, but the technology has really expedited this whole mental health issue. So some of you probably know exactly what I'm discussing here, but this is something we'll come back and discuss further. So technology also has those issues associated: pornographic material, there's a black internet or dark internet, there are issues associated with the gambling, online gambling. So people have lots of other problems on the internet. So when you are on the internet, try to control and limit your time. You don't have to check every few seconds if somebody is answered your text or not, somebody has put like or not, did not like. You don't have to do that. That's the sign of the narcissistic person, that you are self-centered. All you care is about you. So we have created hundreds of millions of kids with that kind of mindset. It is very hard to untangle and very hard to undo it. So unfortunately, that's what's happening, that people ask their girlfriends and boyfriends to commit suicide and they filmed it. And then after they were caught, They don't even feel they did something bad. This girl who's currently in jail, she's texting her boyfriend to kill himself. You probably followed that one in the court. And he's in a truck, and she said, no, go back, and you have to kill yourself. There's another guy in Colorado. He bought everything for his girlfriend so he can film how it feels like to be hanged. And she hanged herself. So people have lost the conscious, have lost the feeling, the empathy, the compassion, the mercy for other human beings. And this is one of the health concerns we have, the internet. So some of you don't recognize that everything you do and say has an impact on your heart, have impact on your brain. So if you are watching somebody is shooting in these games, shooting games, it has an impact on you. You become desensitized. What's the word? Sensitized, which means you have no more feelings left for other human beings. You have, it's just normal for you. So be very careful when you are in that kind of arena as well.
So more on the subject of, these shooting games have a desensitization, monetization thing on, the human mind and the human heart. Well, how would you be able to theoretically describe that, or even put that into a factual piece of evidence to say, this specific game created this many, people with, without the ability to empathize for people? I personally don't think that you should blame, shoot 'em up games, because it's, for most men, the act of hunting, whether it may be physical and or on a computer, it is an instinctual thing.
Okay, so what happens? The impact on different people is different. So it might be normal for me to see this kind of material and wouldn't make any difference to me, but it might be completely different reaction by somebody else. So unfortunately, when you have these kind of tools available for everybody, so there'll be some people who will break. He will break in the process. It might not leave any impact on me because my brain, that part of my brain has matured, and I can segmentize, or I can compartmentalize, I can differentiate. This is my boundary, this is right and this is wrong. But not everybody. There's a lot of mushiness, there's a lot of confusion and distraction for a lot of population. And we are talking about giving these technologies to 8, 9 years old, 10 years old, when the brain is still developing. And the studies show the brain is still developing until you're 18, 19 years old. These days, even you're 30 years old and your brain is still developing. Wife is sleeping in another room and you're playing your video game all night. You don't want to go. I know somebody is getting a divorce. She works all day, and her husband, he only wants to play video games. He doesn't want to do anything else. So his goal is that he will become a professional video game player. So there are issues associated with that one. So it has impact on some people, might not have some impact on other people. So environmental issues, the technology also. What time do we have? Do we have
10:18?
10:18. So we are a little bit late. So environmental issues, changing technologies and changing phones every year. So it creates a lot of green issues. Green company involves reducing the electricity consumed. In fact, Bitcoin is an example. The cryptocurrencies that when you verify one Bitcoin, it takes a lot of energy for the verification process. So that's something we want to. So we want to make sure that we recycle, we use energy efficient devices, and try to extend the life of your technologies, your smartphone. Your smartphone doesn't need to change if it's fully functional, it's working fine after 2 or 3 years. Try to use for longer periods of time. Try to donate it for the proper replacement. Last part of the chapter talks about the difference between different types of software. There are 2 categories of software: system software and application software. System software are your operating systems, device drivers, utility programs, even some programming languages. They fall under that category. The application software, your Excel, Access, browsers, games, those are application software. Okay, then we learn how to install them. So I'm not going to talk about it. How do we install them? So you also need somebody called a developer or coder or programmer to develop these kind of software. Some of you probably have learned coding, or some of you probably will join our classes, especially if in your computer science or related areas, to learn how to do coding. In the course of a day, it is possible that you'll use one of these kind of technologies. You will access the internet, maybe you'll do the messaging. There's a difference between instant messaging versus texting. There's a slight difference. Similarly, discussion boards we have on our Canvas side, they are different. There's slight variations in that one. We might use VoIP. Most of you we use VoIP, which is Voice over Internet Protocol. We are not using the traditional infrastructure to make phone calls. We are using the internet to make phone calls. Used to be two separate systems. Now they are kind of connected together. That's why your AT&T can provide you the internet and the TV programming. Even your cable company can provide you the internet and cable programming, because they are using the internet, and they are using high-speed internet which is accelerated by your fiber optics. Then you have a wireless providers. Wireless, they have towers, and the wireless towers are after some distance. They cover about 8-mile radius or so. Then there's another tower. There's another tower. Some towers are very physically can easily be identifiable. Some of them probably are not that easily identifiable. Wireless messaging services. So you probably use some of them or most of them on daily basis. GPS, chat rooms, and so on and so forth. A communication device is a hardware transfers the data. So when something is communicated to you, you need some kind of device. Modem stands for modulator, demodulator. Modem, MO for modulation, DEM for demodulation. So converts the analog signal into digital signal, and vice versa, digital signal from your device to analog signal. We'll talk about modem and these devices in another chapter later on. But that's how the communication takes place between two nodes or two computers. Node is a computer or some kind of device which is connected on the internet. And how do we do it? We use, if we are using the wireless technologies, we might be using Wi-Fi. We might be using Bluetooth if it's in a small area. If you are very close to your television, you can send a signal from your television, from your phone to television, and vice versa by using Bluetooth. Or you're in your car, you can actually connect your phone with your car system, so you can actually receive voice or texting even by using Bluetooth. Or we can use cell radio as well. So network, I have the definition written here. It's a collection of different nodes, collection of different devices, collection of computers, collection of other technologies in the infrastructure. So it's not only the computers, could be printers, could be cameras, could be gateways, could be servers, could be modems, could be so many different types of devices connected on the network. All right, so in your home network, you might have some of these things. You might be sharing devices, you might be interacting with other devices, you might have some way to access your photos wirelessly or wired, and businesses, they also have similar kind of things. I think that this is probably the last slide or so. So when we use Canvas, for example, or SAM site, that falls under education technologies. When we are using, for example, watching a Netflix, that probably falls under entertainment technology. Help me with the healthcare. What could be an example of healthcare?
MyKP.org.
So you have your doctor says we have a portal, so all the lab results, diagnostics you can do on your, or you can communicate with your healthcare provider. That could be your healthcare related. Science could be now these days these things are very much kind of combined in so many different platforms. So anybody has used any science technology or some kind of website or some kind of system? Yeah.
NASA.org.
Yeah, so National Science Foundation, or even some data you can access from Department of Labor, where you can access some data for research. All these could fall under that one. When you make a DMV appointment, that would be under government. When you do your banking or credit card payments, that might be under finance. You retail, when you go to Amazon to make purchases. When you are traveling, you go to the airline website. How many have never made online reservation for airline? Okay, never made a reservation for hotel. Okay, so, but 20 years ago, I started doing this. I have not hardly called, unless there's a dispute with refund or some other problem, but hardly have any interaction with any one of those agents, which means everything can be done online. Every single thing can be done online these days. And I gave you some examples earlier on. Publishing, manufacturing. Manufacturing is also, they use various types of technologies to access. So you can have different types of users. You could be a home user, and that's what I was referring earlier, that for a home user, you don't need a very high-speed internet to pay $80 or $100 if it's not a package deal. If it's a package deal, probably it might be a better deal. Small home and office user. You can be a mobile user where you're a salesperson, you're an insurance agent, you're always on a go. You could be a power user. These are the people who are, even they're power gamers too. Power gamers are high-end gamers. So, but these power users are basically accessing very large amount of data to run their systems. For example, for geographical information system, which is called GISs. GISs are, you need very high amount of data to figure it out, what kind of trees there, how many trees are there in that city. It's a lot of data is needed for weather forecasting. And you can be a business user such as enterprise user. All right, so this is the end of the chapter. This chapter was just a very easy survey chapter just to understand what's coming. Most of these slides will become separate chapters later on. So we'll be discussing these concepts in more detail later on. So most of you probably, like I recommended, when you're watching this video, you have the slides opened in the background so you can actually see, because some of the things were skipped. Also, it's not a bad idea to read the chapter before you watch this video. But if you didn't have a chance, this is a chance to read the chapter. I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.